Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Chiho Feinler, Chief Program Officer for Save the Music Foundation. Save the Music is a national nonprofit organization, and our mission is to help students, schools, and communities reach their full potential through the power of making music. We do this by investing in instruments, equipment, technology, and resources in public school music classrooms, supporting educators through program development and professional learning, and advocating for music education at the local and national levels. Save the Music is proud to partner with the American String Teachers Association and the Center for Arts Education and Social Emotional Learning to bring you this webinar today. Reimagining the Orchestra through Social Emotional Learning with Dr. Scott Edgar, Jonathan Taylor Rush, and Isaac Sinnett. Before we get to the program, I'm pleased to welcome ASTA President, Kristen Pellegrino, to say a few words. Kristen.
Thank you so much. Good evening and welcome to the first event of our 2022 ASTA virtual conference. We're thrilled to be partnering with Save the Music Foundation and the Center for Arts Education and Social Emotional Learning for this opening webinar, which helps us move forward from our keynote with Dr. Scott Edgar last year during our first ever virtual conference. Last year, Scott helped us understand the connections between social and emotional learning and music education. This year, we get a deep dive into how we can make our educational space, the orchestra classroom and rehearsal hall, more welcoming for students, the students we wish to serve. I'm thrilled to welcome Scott Edgar, Director of Practice and Research for the Center of Arts Education and Social Emotional Learning, and to introduce our esteemed panelists and to get us started. Thank you.
Kristen, thank you so much. Chiho, thank you so much. And everyone at ASTA, thank you so much for giving us a space to be able to talk with you today. It's all about relationships, isn't it, friends? And here's the deep, dark secret. I would have never gotten through Michigan if it wasn't for Kristen Pellegrino. It's all about the people who are in our lives to help lift us up. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how the orchestral space is something that is welcoming for many, but maybe not for all. And our panelists are going to help us reimagine what the orchestra can be to provide a space of identity, belonging, and agency for everyone as we want to open up our doors, open up the aperture so that we can provide a space for everyone, more music and more people. So, who's going to be joining us? Well, the first person is Jonathan Taylor Rush. Hailed as a continually rising talent in the conducting world by the Baltimore Sun, Jonathan Taylor Rush brings passion, unique interpretation, and a refreshing energy to the orchestral experience. Rush was appointed as the assistant conductor for the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra in the fall of 2020. Previously, Rush served as music director of the Buckeye Philharmonic Orchestra, as well as conducting fellow for the Baltimore Symphony Youth Orchestra. In 2018, Rush was a Project Inclusion Conducting Fellow with the Chicago Sinfonietta, and in 2019 was named Assistant Conductor. As winner of the 2018 Respighi Prize in Conducting at age 22, Rush made his professional orchestra debut with the Chamber Orchestra of New York in Carnegie Hall. Rush continues to conduct both nationally and internationally with notable debuts including the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, Chicago Sinfonietta, Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, and Nairobi Philharmonic. Joining Jonathan is going to be Isaac Sinnett, and he is the Senior Associate Director for Ravinia's renowned Reach, Teach, Play education programs. In his 15 years with Ravinia, Isaac has contributed greatly to the growth of their portfolio of education programs. He has also led the creation of Ravinia's El Sistema-inspired program, Sistema Ravinia, a program that continues to strive for musical growth, positive social development of youth, and pathways for continued success. Collaborating with colleagues from around the globe, he embraces the values of El Sistema, notably learning into the ideals of access, equity, community, musicianship, and ensemble. We are honored to have Jonathan and Isaac with us tonight. But before we kick things off to Jonathan, I think we have a moment to see a cartoon that epitomizes how many of us first came to know the orchestra.
Leopold! 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 schuld.
Hello, everyone. Imagine this video clip 20 years ago, and there's a 5 or 6-year-old boy watching Looney Tunes in absolute awe of Bugs Bunny making an absolute fool out of Conducting. Imagine this boy being so inspired that he gets his mother's sewing needles, or maybe even a chopstick from Chinese takeout, and starts to mimic everything that he saw Bugs Bunny do. He might be standing in front of a mirror, conducting to music that's blasting throughout his home, or even making up a tune inside of his head. Now, imagine this boy's inspiration slowly fading away. Not necessarily because he couldn't find any conductors, and not necessarily because Bugs Bunny wasn't real. But his inspiration started to fade away because he could never find a conductor that looked like him. This boy was me. And, you know, growing up in an extremely musical family, music was my life. You know, my parents, they were pastors, but also gospel musicians. My sisters, they're also singers and things of that sort. Music was in my life from when I was born. I tell people I was pretty much born in a choir rehearsal, a church choir rehearsal. But music has always been in my life. And even though I have a gospel music foundation, most of my parents, our parents, instilled in us an appreciation for all types of music, all genres of music. So in my household, you would hear rock music, you'd hear jazz, you'd hear country music, you'd hear soul, you'd hear hip hop, you'd hear anything that you can imagine. However, you wouldn't always hear classical music. As a matter of fact, it was fairly rare. And as a matter of fact, I never really went to classical music concerts. So where did my classical music inspiration come from? Where did my inspiration to become a conductor come from? Well, that clip that you just saw, and then other clips of that same show, Looney Tunes. That's where I got most of my classical music exposure. And that's how I knew at age 5 that I had to become a conductor. It was Bugs Bunny that did it for me. And so because music was in my life and because I wasn't getting away from it, I had to pursue music. And I pursued music all the way through college. I played the saxophone from 4th grade all the way through college. I sang as long as I could remember. You know, I even studied piano and studied that in college. And I knew I had to pursue this. But then I still had this feeling deep down in my heart that I would not get the opportunity to conduct because I never saw one that looks like me. As I get to college, I decide that I want to pursue music education. Not only because I had a passion for teaching, you know, a passion for even just being around students and allowing to learn from them, but also allowing them to learn from me, not just because I had that passion, but also because that was the second best thing that I could get to when it comes to conducting. Conducting has always been a dream of mine. It was a dream of mine since I was a little kid. And that was the closest that I thought I could get to it. But when I get to school, I find out that they have a conducting department. And I realized that, when you get into undergrad, they don't really have many conducting degrees at all. But found that they had a conducting department, went to one of the teachers in the conducting department, and I was like, hey, look, ever since I was a kid, this is something that I wanted to do. Maybe there's a way in. Can you tell me how I can become a conductor? Like, what do I have to do? This has always been a dream of mine. And this teacher said, I don't think you should do that. I actually think you should stay in this field of music education because that's where you'll be most successful. Most successful. And it also didn't help that the following year, there was a family friend of mine who was inside the classical music world. She was an organist and she's played with many orchestras. And so I figured she would have much experience. So I went up to her and I said, hey, look, I really want to do this. I have to become a conductor. I've seen it now. Like, what do I have to do to make this work? And she said, whoa, hold on. You need to stay in gospel and stay in jazz music because they won't want to see you as a conductor. And because third time's a charm, I go back to school that same year. And this time I decide to go up to the orchestra director at the time at my school. And I found out that he was actually doing an independent study for interested students in conducting, interested undergraduate students doing conducting. And I went up to him, talked to him, and I said, hey, look, this is something that I've always wanted to do. This is something that I have to do. What do I have to do to become a conductor? Can you please help me? I would love to even participate in your independent study. Would you have me as a student? He was an older man, but he looked at me up and down and he said, no, turned around, walked away. And then later referred to me as the boy with the earrings. That's why I still wear them to this day. But as you could imagine, from being a young child and never seeing a conductor that looked like me, to finally getting old enough to start looking into conducting and talking to these professionals who would know a whole lot about the profession, to hear them say no, you can imagine the kind of toll that would have on someone. Well, it made me really want to quit. All those no's, never getting support, it made me just feel like, you know what, this is it. I will be a teacher. It's still something that I like, and I still get the opportunity to conduct. But I thought I could pursue my dreams, but maybe not. Well, it also doesn't help that same year, I had a very, very close friend of mine. She was killed. And that was my sophomore year in college. I'll never forget it. And when I found out about this, I was obviously heartbroken, but it actually sparked something in my mind, It let me realize that, well, tomorrow is not promised. And my friend, she was not able to pursue her dreams. And so while I have life, while I have breath, I can't let anyone who doesn't necessarily see my potential turn me away from pursuing something that I know is right for me, something that I know is just flowing inside of my blood. I can't let anyone turn me away from that. And so I decided, you know what? Come hell or high water, I'm going to push and I'm going to try and pursue this dream. And the moment I did that, all of a sudden, this friend of mine found out that I was interested in conducting. And he happened to be the music director of this orchestra called the Buckeye Philharmonic Orchestra. And I'm like, oh, okay. And he told me about the orchestra, it's a student-run orchestra, and said, hey, look, I know you're into conducting. Why don't you come and observe some of my rehearsals? So I did that. I loved it. And I kept going. I kept watching the rehearsals. And even sometimes he would let me come up and even work with the students. Well, that also happened to be his last year. And the orchestra was going to need a music director. And long story short, they voted me to actually be their next music director. So I would have started that my junior year in college. And so now I'm finally getting the opportunity to stand in front of an ensemble, to stand in front of an orchestra and actually pursue my dream. Yes, this might have been an amateur level, but I'm finally doing it. That's all I asked for. I'm finally doing it. I finally get the opportunity to conduct an orchestra. I was able then to use this orchestra to record videos and send them out to schools or send them out to different programs and festivals. Got to meet a lot of cool conductors and got to participate and meet, some amazing, famous conductors as well. And some of them told me to apply to their programs. I applied to their programs, even applied to programs that I thought I could never get into. And the programs that, there were some of the professors that I studied with over the summer who told me to apply for their program specifically. I did. And those professors turned me away. They didn't invite me even to audition. And it just so happened that the school that I thought I would never, ever get into and never get invited to was the only school out of all the schools I applied to invite me to come and participate, and was the only school that I got accepted into. And that happened to be Peabody Conservatory, where I got to study with Marin Alsop. And then really the rest is history. I do that. I'm connected with the Chicago Sinfonietta as a conducting fellow, become their assistant conductor. I learn all the behind the scenes work about, just being a conductor and being just a musician in the orchestral world. And then I get a call from the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra asking me to become their assistant conductor. And I tell you this story not to make you feel bad for me and say, oh my gosh, it's such a horrible story, but also inspiring. I'm not looking for that, but I'm telling you this story really to highlight the importance of representation. Had I seen as a little kid a conductor that looked like me, what would my story have been like then? The only representation I had was a cartoon character. And, to a lot of people, that might be just sad. And to me, it's kind of sad that I never had a physical human representation of what I wanted to do. But what would my life have been like if I did? And, while I can't change the past, I can definitely affect the future. And so because I didn't have the representation, I have to make sure that I become the representation. And so I made it a part of my artistic mission, really, to inspire a younger generation of not just conductors, not just musicians, but creators, of thinkers, of people, younger generation of people who do look like me, to inspire them to go ahead and pursue their dreams. Because I want them to be able to, because everybody gets no's in life. I want them to be able to, ask what they must do to become a conductor. And I want a teacher to tell them no, but then for them to say, oh, no, that's not true. There's this conductor, Jonathan Russia, I saw online, or there's conductor, Roderick Cox, or Kalina Bovel that I saw online. Those people, I saw them. So I can do this. So what do I have to do to get to that point? But then I also want to be there to help them get to that point as well. Representation is so important in just this field, especially in the orchestral world, especially for people of color, because we really don't see them in our orchestras or really on our stages. Basketball players get to see somebody that looks like them. Football players get to see someone that looks like them, even doctors. But inside of our field, the world of orchestra, it's rare. And I'm here to change that. My story wasn't easy. I got a whole lot of pushback, a whole lot of no's. However, that little boy who had this dream of becoming a conductor is finally on the stage, still has a whole lot more work to do, but is finally on the stage and finally pursuing their dream with one of the nation's best orchestras. Thank you.
Jonathan, thank you. Thank you for the honesty of your story. Thank you for the courage. Thank you for the vision. And I cannot wait to unpack everything that you said in just a little bit. But first, we're going to hand things over to Isaac, who's going to help us see what this looks like in the classroom on the day-to-day basis at his program at the Ravinia Festival.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Scott. And a special thank you to ASTA and all of you for inviting Ravinia to be here this evening and to share our experiences with you. Jonathan, it's such a privilege to be here with you tonight. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your vision and how we can reimagine the orchestra to include all. At Ravinia, we believe in the power of shared live music moments to inspire ourselves and the world. One of North America's longest running and most artistically diverse music festivals. We hope if you haven't already joined us for a concert, we hope you can join us soon, perhaps in one of our theaters for a chamber music concert, or maybe on the lawn or the pavilion for John Legend, Santana, or of course, one of our mainstay Chicago Symphony Orchestra residency concerts conducted by our chief conductor, Marin Alsop. and Jonathan's mentor. And of course, Maren is a pioneer for change and reimagination and for breaking barriers. We're so thankful for her leadership and what that means for the future and the impact of students within the Reach, Teach, Play programs. Reach, Teach, Play is a portfolio of music education and engagement opportunities, ensuring that music remains accessible to all. We partner with underrepresented schools and community to provide unfettered access to those historically not invited and with the least resources. Our programs provide children and families with inclusive music education programs and live music experiences in their schools and communities and at Ravinia. We aim to reach thousands and bring the joy of music throughout Chicago area. We provide teacher training and programs that teach the foundations of music and allow children to express themselves creatively. And we encourage students to play instruments and develop their talents and deepen their connection to music. Tonight, I'll be talking about one of those programs, Sistema Ravinia. And I'll largely be focusing in on one of our nucleos or program locations in Waukegan in Lake County. Sistema Ravinia is inspired by the Sistema music education model, which emphasizes both community building and musical excellence. So that intersection of access and excellence. Our version looks like an intensive after-school orchestra program for students in the 3rd through 8th grade and now beyond, but a little bit more about that later. Sistema Ravinia fosters social development and creates pathways for continued success. We aim to create a world where every child can envision themselves in the world's best orchestras and on the greatest concert stages. So what does that look like for Ravinia? Let's look at the next slide and what reimagining the orchestra through SEL can be. It must be intentional and it needs to be embedded. SEL is not something that we do to our students, it's something that we do with our students. It's not just an exercise, it's not something about minute 1 or ensuring that we check that box in a form in minute 37. SEL is a way of planning, listening, responding, and connecting. So let's start in the next slide with identity. Let's ensure that we start from the beginning, not the middle or the end. Connection first, listen, build trust. So what does that look like for us? In our next slide, we have a couple of pages from our student journal that our team has created. I believe that's a resource available to you this evening or as a resource, a part of this webinar series. We want to find out about our students as individuals first. We want to be in tune with and validate what they are feeling. On the right is a lesson log or a practice chart, and it's a way to have a conversation. If we're not already using emojis, let's start using them. It's a way for students to be really honest about their experience and their relationship to what they're doing. On the left is one of my favorite pages, and it talks about your orchestra experience. Oftentimes in ensemble programs, we start with the ensemble first, and then we put the students into that. But with your orchestra experience, what would it look like if we got to know them first as individuals? If we had 50 yours, and then we created one ensemble. On the next slide, we move into belonging. So we have identity, we build that connection, we create that trust. And then now we need to build a community of belonging, relationships, celebrate cultural assets, have moments for vulnerability and spaces for courageous conversations. So how can students see themselves in this space? We'll talk about 3 aspects here, and I'm sure there's many more, but this is the basis of our journey. Students need to see themselves in others, as Jonathan was mentioning. We need to broaden our musical repertoire and our learning experiences. And last, we need to create spaces and environment that build relevance for our parents. In the next slide, we see this beautiful picture of Jonathan conducting our Sistema Ravinia students last summer when he was at Ravinia, making his Chicago Symphony Orchestra debut, which was phenomenal. He led our students, and then they got to go see him conduct one of the world's greatest orchestras. But before he started making music with our students, he was so excited, and he looked at them and told them how thankful he was for their experience today, because when he was young, he never had the opportunity to play in an ensemble led by someone that looked like him. The students must see themselves in others. We need to broaden our repertoire. We need to play all kinds of music, different styles, and those require different skills. We need to ensure that we have music that recognizes the cultural assets of our students. We need to find and play more music by diverse composers. And I'm sure we're all aware of the difficulty of sometimes even finding really great music for that early elementary and middle school ensemble. So let's all get together and let's create more music by diverse composers for our students. And on the next slide, you see this beautiful picture, and you can see the connection of those two individuals. This was at our winter concert this past December in our Lake County Waukegan Nucleo. And normally our concert would have, a couple of breaks in it for stage changes or transitions. And I would get up, or maybe somebody else would get up and talk. But this time, the manager said, what if we did something for our families during that time? What if we brought in something that was very meaningful for them? The community of Waukegan has a large Mexican heritage. So we brought in the Chicago Ballet Dance Folklorico for them. And it was an opportunity for the parents to see that this is for them too. And if our families don't feel a community of belonging, how can our students? Finally, let's move to the next slide. And I would love to show you this quote, which epitomizes a sense of belonging. I never thought that someone like me, coming from a place like Waukegan, could be considered for this kind of opportunity. This is what creating a safe and brave space looks like. And this can lead to agency. And as we move on to the next slide, you can see agency. It's where student voice is heard. It's where it's amplified, and it's where change begins to be created. If we journey back to the picture of these lovely young musicians, you see an identity that it was less clear of a picture. It was more transparent. And then in belonging, it became a little bit more vibrant. And then in agency, it's in its full vibrancy. In fact, when I was thinking about what I would say about agency, I wasn't even really sure. And then in talking with a colleague, they suggested that perhaps it was most difficult to talk about agency because that's when you as the adult or you as the teacher are not in control. It's the students that have the clarity. It's the student's voice that is needing to be heard. So what does agency look like in our program? The next slide has some concert dedications. And I couldn't help while listening to Jonathan and think about that third quote. I dedicate this program to me because I'm still here. That is the epitome of agency. It can be hard, but the student is still there. And best of all, they are celebrating that. As we move forward, we have a picture that is worth 1,000 words. It's that community. It's you. It's the teachers connecting to the students. It's through those relationships. We have so many great teachers in our program and so many amazing teachers throughout other programs in the country and schools throughout the country and the world. It's you that the connection begins with, that trust, that building the community of belonging and that agency. It's where that shift from engagement to empowerment begins. So let's pass the microphone. And we have a picture of 3 students in the next slide and what agency looks like for us. And it's a journey. We're just beginning. And we've made plenty of errors along the way and things that we had to stop and respond and reflect on and do better. And sometimes we needed to go to the students and have honest conversations. So if you have a moment in which you can pass the microphone to a student, take that opportunity. And it might not be perfect. And that's exactly what's perfect because it's their words, not ours. It's them expressing their journey in music, not us expressing it for them. These 3 students that you see in this picture are in high school. And I mentioned at the beginning that our program goes through the 8th grade. And we weren't sure what to do. We wanted to have something that would be intentional and meaningful for them. And so we decided to go and ask them. And then in asking them, they came to us and said, we want to continue. We want to create an orchestra for high schoolers. We want to create an orchestra so we can still create music with our friends. They wanted to be a part of the leadership. They wanted to be a part of selecting the repertoire. They wanted to be a part of setting what it meant to be a part of this ensemble. It was their agency that expanded the continuum for students like them and for all of the students that will come after them. So to wrap up in our last slide, the impact of reimagination can seem really blurry, especially to some of us as adults, but to the kids, it's never blurry to them. You can see that when they have that identity, when they feel that sense of belonging and they have the agency, it's so crystal clear. When we invite, when we welcome, connect, when we listen and respond with our students, seeds of change can grow. And together we can create a new identity, build a community of belonging, and facilitate an environment for agency to reimagine the orchestra. Thank you.
Isaac, thank you so much for showing us what this looks like at Ravinia. I'd like to invite Jonathan back to our space, and we're going to start to have a conversation. We're going to start to talk a little bit about what this looks like. And we have a few questions to tee up, but we would love to hear what your questions are. So please drop those into the Q&A in the Zoom, and we'll make sure we get to as many as possible. Jonathan, I want to start with a question for you. And you obviously had to create some of these experiences for yourself. You had to go to people. You had to be proactive. And I was just reading something on social media the other day that says, well, imagine what would happen instead of teaching our students to be resilient, that we made our society less traumatic. And it was just like, well, the clarity of that, well, yes, it makes so much sense. So from that perspective, Jonathan, what are some ways that we can create opportunities to provide some of this for our young conductors and undergrads in programs and in high schools?
Awesome question. Thank you for that, Scott. You know, I think it's extremely important not only just to create opportunities, but to create those opportunities even early on inside just the stages of where students are growing up in. You know, oftentimes we wait until people are allowed to finally start something. So like, you know, for me, I've known I want to be conductor forever, but then I realized that there aren't even undergraduate programs for conducting. And then there aren't even summer programs for young conductors. So it's like, what can I do to even get my hands onto this? How do I even get the experience? Because even when we get jobs, everybody wants experience, right? Well, for me, I think if we start early on by creating these opportunities early on, for instance, if I find out that students here in Baltimore want to conduct or want to become a conductor, I'm not going to wait until they're I'm not going to wait until they're capable to, you know, actually wave their hands or read a score. No, we're going to start early. Let's get them in front of one of their ensembles and let them conduct a piece for one of their concerts. Let's provide opportunities for them to, you know, work with me or work with other world-class conductors. And to, I mean, I'm not going to go into, you know, like the importance of the direction of your sixth pattern. I'm not going to do all of that stuff, but I'm going to show them, you know, the love that I have for conducting, the passion that I have for conducting, why I do it, what it's really about. But I'm also going to teach the importance of showing them music, you know, that, and this is just an example for young conductors, but I think we can do that for many people. A lot of times we think students or people are too young to start something that they would love to do, but I'm a living witness that even when I was 5, 6 years old, I was, yes, waving my arms, but it's not like I was just doing nonsense. I actually went online, especially when I got older. I went online. I learned what a conducting pattern was. I remember writing with the dry erase marker on the mirrors inside of my house and getting in trouble. But I used to act like I was actually teaching a conducting class, an imaginary conducting class in my head on this is how you conduct a 4 pattern. This is how you conduct a 3 pattern. How cool would it have been if I had an opportunity as a young kid to just, you know, stand in front of an ensemble, you know, once a week just to, you know, perfect that craft, just to get the opportunity to do it and feel like I'm pursuing my dreams. I feel like I would be that much more ahead. And so why not start earlier and create these opportunities? I think it'll definitely benefit us a lot.
Jonathan, thank you for that, because I think so many of us have gone through conducting courses, and when we think about what we end with, it's like, well, I can teach floor, door, wall, ceiling in one day, right? And then we can move on to so many more things that are truly what it's part to be a conductor.
Absolutely.
So Isaac, what a gift do you have? Because you have these students at the age that Jonathan was just referencing.
Yeah, I mean, and the only thing I'm going to give is examples of exactly what Jonathan's talking about. It has to be from the beginning, and I think traditionally there's sort of this interesting concept that it has to be perfect before it can be showcased. But of course, we understand that perfection is the kryptonite to progress. And progress is the product that we're trying to showcase. It's not about something being perfect. It's about what do we have right now, and let's talk about it. What's something that, we just had a concert with our students and our parents, and we asked everyone to think about what's something you're proud of that you can do well right now. What's something that you can do now in March that you couldn't do in December? And what's something that you can't do now, but you want to do in May? And what are the steps that we can talk about that it's going to take to get there? It's about the process. It's about the progress. Prior to the pandemic, on day number 1 with a new group of students, we would have this graduation where they would walk across the stage, they would get their instruments, and then returning students and the new students would then disappear from the hall, and they would go into rooms, and the returning students would teach the new students how to play one note or maybe 2 notes. And then we would come back to the stage with hundreds of kids on there, and we would play an easy arrangement of Ode to Joy with the returning students playing the melody and the new students playing the 1 or the 2 notes on the downbeat that they could play. And the success and the pride that they feel, I mean, it's what carries them through, because they don't have to wait to feel like they can or cannot do something, because it's about the progress. It's about the journey. Right now, in one of our nucleos, students are coming up, and every day a new student is conducting the orchestra, the string orchestra, getting ready for their concert, because we want to involve the families. And so we're going to have this raffle where one of the families is going to win the raffle, and they're going to get to conduct their students on the stage in the concert. But, you got to prepare the students for this. And so we're having it's a great opportunity for students to conduct. And in fact, just today, the principal heard this beautiful music down the hall, walked into the room, and they were the guest conductor. And so it's whether you're an adult, a child, it's about the opportunity to be able to try something. And making a mistake is the best opportunity that we have. It's not bad to fall. It's great to fall, but it's great to fall in a space where you can be picked up and have the opportunity to try again.
Can I join in? No, I mean, Isaac, exactly. And I just wanted to throw this out there because last week we just did it at the Baltimore Symphony, where we went out to the Maryland Sinnett, and we did this thing called Conduct Me, where we had the orchestra out there and let different senators of the state and different people come around and actually conduct the orchestra. And we did it to Eine Kleine Nachtmusik, but it was awesome because the orchestra didn't just go ahead and play and ignore the conductors. And what they did was any participant that went up there, the orchestra followed them exactly, but gave them the opportunity to actually see how it feels to be a conductor, but then also let them know that they do have the control. But also just a cool thing to let them try, because many people are always curious about what that feels like, what it looks like. And so for them to get that opportunity to go up there and to conduct the orchestra, it made them feel a different way. And we had all these volunteers come up. Some people were nervous at first and then said, you know what, let me give it a shot. And it just even gave them a sense of fulfillment just to get the opportunity to try something. And even though it was far from perfect, I've never heard Eine Kleine played so slow before at some moments, but like it was also just such a beautiful experience to watch, really, just to see just even adults experience that.
That's amazing. I can't wait to have an experience like that. And it's just such a great example of music is not something that is us to somebody else. It's the combination of the two sides coming together and celebrating what that journey and what that community is.
And as you said, you've never heard an interpretation as slow, and that's okay. This is one of the things we really talk about in the SEL world, is the opportunity to tinker. That oftentimes we go in with the answer, we go in with the one right way to do it, the traditional way to do it, and the students might have a different thought. And when they have an opportunity just to tinker with something, to play with something, that they're able to bring themselves into that space and say, hey, maybe I found something that works a little bit better for me. And I think that's so important for us to remember as our role of teacher in the discussion that Isaac gave us is more of a facilitator. How can we set the space for these folks in the Sinnett to come up and just tinker with conducting? Because we've always put conducting, composing, improvising, we put these musical things on a pedestal. And it's, you have to be a professional to try to pull these things off. So, Jonathan, in that vein, what are some ways that you think we can honor the tradition of the orchestra? Because I've heard you talk many times about, we're going to keep on doing Beethoven, we're going to keep on doing Mozart and Brahms because it's great music. But I also heard some conversations from Isaac here that we need to broaden composership. We need to have representation. So how do we meld those two worlds without falling into this sticky zone of tokenism?
Oh, goodness. What not to say about this? Listen, a lot of times when people hear, a lot of times people get scared when they hear that, we're going to bring new music. We're trying to, bring new music to our concert halls, and a lot of people are saying enough with Beethoven, enough with Brahms, even enough with Stravinsky. And people get scared of that. They're like, wait, but no, I love these classics. Like, how can we get rid of these classics? And it bothers them so much that they even hate the fact of just having new music. And I think really, in order to preserve this tradition, we have to make it more so our foundation. The traditions have to become our foundation. It's the root, it's where everything gets built upon, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we go away. You can't have a building without a foundation. You need the foundation to keep the building standing. And so I would never, ever preach getting rid of the great classics, but I will preach getting rid of, letting that be the only music that we do perform. There is a space for the old and the new to both exist. And it has to be on a scale, and it has to be a balanced scale. I feel like a lot of people want to come to concerts where they're like, okay, let's have like 50 minutes of Beethoven, and then you can probably put like 5 minutes of just this new composer. And it's like, no, it can't work that way, because at the end of the day, these new composers also have a voice that needs to be heard. These new composers are even a part of a group that's been neglected for a long time too. So you have these new composers who also need to, really come up a lot more to change the scope of just really what the world of classical music has been for hundreds and hundreds of years, and so we have to create a space of balance where we still have our tradition as our foundation, but we're also leaving the door open for new music to come. But it's not even just necessarily the music that we perform, but it's really even the spaces that we perform in. We have this stigma that classical music has to be done inside of an auditorium with a stage with, over 2,500 seats. It does not have to be done like that. As a matter of fact, the symphonies are a little different, but half the music that we do listen to was not performed in that setting at all. It wasn't even a formal setting most of the time. People were shouting or eating, laughing, or joking around while this music was playing. This was entertainment. And I feel like, our world of classical music has gone away from, we've lost that entertainment factor. Now it's become this elitist themed event where people have to look at us and we have to dress a certain way and we have to act a certain way. And we all come for the music. We don't necessarily come for what you're wearing. We don't necessarily come just to, be looked down upon. People come to concerts to really experience the music. So why not we still give them the music, give them something old, give them something new, but why not change the experience, the way that they experience the music? Let's play in a warehouse. Let's play in a parking garage, for goodness sakes. Let's play outside. Let's do something different, something that will keep the classics, but also something that'll be kept up with the times that we're living in too, because the times are changing. And I promise you, I don't see many people walking around my apartment complex or many people walking around the grocery store with a tuxedo on. So what are we going to do to change that?
That's so great, Jonathan, and maybe just a couple of like very specific examples of what that might look like for us. I mentioned earlier, we just need to perform all types of music. It's not whether we're on one side of the pendulum or on the other side of the pendulum. It's about the skills and the technique that students are learning. If the students have a robust knowledge of what the technical and theoretical aspects are, or what they can do on their instruments, then they can even create their own genres of music. I think, we're trying as much as possible to have concerts that are produced by students. The students went into the community and found a church, and they asked the church whether or not we could have a concert there. And so we hosted a community concert in that church, not necessarily a really new space for a concert, but it was the students who chose that space for the concert, which is the depth of the meaning behind it. And right now, in terms of like creating new music, we're even in conversations with a composer and talking about like, how can we figure out what it means to be a middle schooler, and how can we represent that music for them? So can we have conversations with students where we can ask them really great questions, perhaps about values, or perhaps around an issue that they want to have a conversation around, so they end up curating what this piece might look like. They give the input and the composer can give the output. And then there's other opportunities where the students can be the composers, just like conducting or just like playing. What are the opportunities that we're giving them to create something that they hear, or something that represents what they're feeling? And it's sort of through these opportunities when we start at the beginning, not the end, but we start at the beginning, that through that time, they can start to curate and create concerts that are a way of sharing themselves with others. Because again, as you're saying, it's sharing something with others. It can be a party, it can be a celebration, and it's whatever that is for you that you want to share with others.
So powerful from both those examples. I think back to a year before the pandemic hit, and we had the Catalyst Quartet on campus at Lake Forest College. And in their concert, the audience gave a rip-roaring applause in between movements. And the cardinal sin, right? And I'll never forget, because in the talk back afterwards, where we had our music majors, just talking through, someone said, "Didn't it bug you that they clapped in between movements?" And I don't remember exactly which member of the quartet, it might have been Jesse Montgomery, said, "If they want to applaud for me, who am I to tell them when they can and why they should do it when? They are appreciating the music. So why would I ever step on that?" And ever since I heard that, it was just like this light bulb moment of what tradition. And in that moment, it was just such a moment of grace. They took a full bow. Yes, did it provide discontinuity between the movements? Yes, but it was more important for that audience to feel appreciated at the moment. And this gets to this idea of tradition, that oftentimes all of our large ensembles, not just the orchestra, but we've become so performance focused. And I think many of us have come back from that a little bit throughout the pandemic. But I still think there are so many of these performance weights that are on our shoulders that oftentimes we think, oh, an extra musical benefit, or spending time working on something that might not directly influence a repertoire performance on a concert, is a huge ask for many of our teachers. So I'm going to throw to both of you, how do we start with this first step to not only get us to see extra musical benefits as a valuable use of our time, but also starting to embed things such as creativity into our ensembles?
Well, first, I feel like we have to understand that the first thing that we have to understand is that not every student is necessarily there to be a performer. Not every student is a part of our programs to, be on the, Chicago Symphony stage, or not everyone wants to even be on the stage. Some people are just participating in music because they just need another outlet. Some people are participating in music or participating in programs because they need an escape from the cares of the world or from whatever situations that they're living in. And some people just do it because they want to do something different. It's not always a goal to necessarily be a performer. And so with that in mind, we have to start to be a little more creative in trying to find ways that we can still, let these students let them participate in what we do, but also we have to be creative in the way that we teach and not always pounding on them that, well, if you're going to get the orchestra job, or if you want to be in this, if you want to do this, if you want to do that, you have to do it this way, or you have to do it that way. We have to create more opportunities for just all of our students, no matter what their end goal is. All of our students need to have an opportunity for them to just be inside of our classes, or even inside of just our environments, or wherever we're teaching, whether it be a class, whether it be a music festival, or whether it be a summer camp or something, whatever place that we're at, we have to realize they're not always here to perform. They're not always here to, be a professional musician, but some people just need that outlet. And so how does that look? How does it look to create this space? Well, for me, or something that I'm realizing is, well, look, if I'm realizing that not all my students are going to be orchestra musicians, I have to realize too that, music is just beyond the orchestra. Music is music in general. So why are we, limiting our students to just playing their instrument inside of an orchestra? Why can't we let them teach them, about jazz and playing music in a jazz setting, or teach them that, music is beyond just, playing on a stage. You might be able to play behind a screen, or you might be able to, play for film in a studio. There's so many different outlets and so many different areas that people can pursue music in, if that's something that they want to pursue in. But if that's not something that they want to pursue, we still have to create that space for them to still get still have a meaningful experience, even though they're not necessarily going to, get our maybe most preferred end result of being a symphony orchestra musician. Does that kind of answer your question, Scott?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's great. And in the chat here, we see that they love the perspective that students are there for their own reasons, and it's also like a recognition for all of our teachers out there, and like the variety of levels that come. Like maybe you're in the 7th grade, but you have someone that just started to learn yesterday, and you need to include them in your ensemble, and that can be really difficult. And so I think the perspective that I would like to add to what Jonathan said, which is just so perfect, is that it's a journey. I think that sometimes we feel like we have to jump into everything all the time, right away, at once. Just try some of those things, try some of those creative things, and see how the students can actually start to take the ownership of the learning process. And I think in the end, it's something that you try, you reflect, you respond, you reimagine, and you take that journey over time. But it's not something that's going to happen overnight, but it's just different ways in which to invite the students into the process. So it's not just you and them, but it's everyone together. And I, want to just recognize the difficulty. You might be one teacher in a room with 50 or 100 kids, and you have to teach everything. And that's a lot. And so it is a journey. And it is about those relationships which you're creating every single day. You're creating that sense of belonging, and you're moving into those spaces of agency of which the students can help to have that empowerment. So thank you for everything you're doing, and hopefully some of this is a benefit and help.
Isaac, I want to dig a little deeper in on that, because I think a big part of this is that teacher agency, that teacher needs to believe that they can mold, facilitate in their own space. And there are so many competing factors of saying, yes, I get this is great, but, and all of these external factors. As someone who works with many, many teachers, Isaac, how do you foster a sense of agency with your community?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's actually something that I think about every single day, because it's sort of, again, that journey of how do we get to that point where all of this holistic learning is in place. And I think it's sort of creating that space, just like we would with our students, for our teachers, where there's that safety net to try, the safety net to fall, and the safety net to know that we do need to get from point one to point end, whatever that is, within that time frame. But there's different ways in which we can do that. Having professional development sessions is important, but having that opportunity to embed those is really important as well. And really just giving it that exploration space. And going in and supporting as much as possible. So it's like, hey, I saw that you wanted to do this. How can I support you? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it with the students. And it's a journey. Sometimes we get it really right in supporting that environment, and sometimes we get it really wrong. And I think that the ability to acknowledge the times when we get it wrong is the most important.
Absolutely. My friends, this has been just such a powerful space to share, and the honor has been mine. We're going to kick it off with a few last thoughts. So, Jonathan, please send us off.
Yeah, really, the biggest thing that I have to say is a comment about just inclusion, because we talk all this talk, we're providing, different ideas or, just different thoughts that we may have. But really, the biggest thing is just including everyone and letting everyone feel safe inside of, just in your environment, in your space, in the space that you all lead, or the space that you all teach. Everyone has to have a voice. Everyone should feel like they have a voice. Everyone should feel like they belong in the space that they're in. And so even when we do, on the same topic that we're talking, even when we do have students who might, who want to play their instrument, they want to know how to play this instrument, they want to love the instrument, we have to make them feel included, because they might not even know what an orchestra is. They might not even know what an orchestra looks like. They might not even know what a concert hall stage looks like, but we still have to be able to foster to them. And if we spend most of our time talking about, orchestra this, orchestra that, or, playing on stage, conductor this, conductor that, they're going to feel left out because they don't know what's going on. So we have to create this space. We're telling all of this stuff just to, spark different ideas in your minds, but also really to create the space to let everyone feel like they belong here, like they're included, and that gives them a sense or idea of feeling safe. And that's really the biggest thing, creating that safe space for all of our students, not just a specific group of them.
A space where they fall in love with orchestra and orchestra falls in love with them. Absolutely. Isaac, send us off.
Yeah, I mean, my last thoughts are just thank you to all the music teachers out there, creating that space and that opportunity for students. And going back to representation and why it matters, without representation, it's just a conversation. So representation is the action. It's that sense of belonging. We are fostering the next generation of musicians, of those that are going to come and replace us in our jobs, and they're going to take what we're doing to the next level, and something that's way more. And the last thing is just to celebrate each and every student. We have to believe that every single student within our programs, or within the ability to join our music making community, can have excellence. They can really strive for it. There's no that student's better than the other student. They're all in a different moment of their process and their progress, and we must believe that they can all achieve. And whether it's through music or not is not always our responsibility, but it is our responsibility to ensure that they can go through identity, belonging, and agency.
Isaac and Jonathan, thank you so much. I think all of us right now who are in education in so many different ways are caught between this really tough position between empathy and grace. We know we're all going through a lot. And Isaac, what you just said, excellence. And I don't think it needs to be an either or. When we lead with empathy and grace, the excellence is there. And I think Jonathan and Isaac helped us see that so profoundly. From the bottom of my heart, Jonathan, Isaac, thank you for the time you've shared. ASTA, Save the Music, many thanks for the space. To our friends at ASTA, please have a great rest of your conference. I'm going to send things back to Chiho Feindler at Save the Music.
Thank you, Scott, Jonathan, and Isaac. And I also echo Isaac to thank you all for attending. And thank you also to ASTA for hosting this webinar, and letting us be part of your conference as well, especially ASTA President Kristen Perguno and Executive Director Lynn Tuttle. Finally, big thanks to KKR COVID Response Fund for their generous support of this work. This concludes our webinar. Thank you again all for being here, and enjoy the rest of your conference. Thank you.